Welcome to the Savannah Sideways podcast, the strange story of Savannah's ancient Roman statuary. I am your host, Jessica Leigh Lebos. Episode 8, The Bridge to Sapelo. So we've drawn a lot of connections from these dusty old statues that have been in storage for almost a century to all sorts of people, places, and time periods. We know that Spencer Schotter built his grand mansion on the outskirts of Savannah and filled it with particular styles and eras of sculptures and paintings that mirrored the collections of other wealthy industrialists of the day. After Schotter's fortunes faltered, we know that the Torreys, the next owners of the mansion and its art, went on to buy Ossabaw, a coastal Georgia barrier island, another trending purchase among the American elite in the first part of the 20th century. When the Great Depression ended the Gilded Age for good, many of these islands became too much of a financial burden and were parceled out for development or protected by the government, or a combination of both. St. Simons and Tybee Islands are accessible by car and have had relatively large residential communities since the 1800s. Sea Island and Little St. Simons now operate as exclusive luxury retreats. St. Catherine's is also privately owned and managed as a nature preserve. As recounted in Episode 4, Ossabaw is protected under the state's Heritage Preserve status and stewarded by the Ossabaw Island Foundation. Jekyll Island is a state park, and a private hotel management company leases and operates the Old Historic Millionaires Club and golf course. The seashore of Cumberland Island is owned by the National Park Service, thanks in no small part to the activism of the Georgia Conservancy and naturalist Carol Ruckteschall. Descendants of the Carnegie family still live on Cumberland, including artist Go-Go Ferguson, who fashions very cool jewelry out of alligator bones and armadillo armor, and is featured in an exhibit at the High Museum in Atlanta. Herds of wild horses still eke out their existence in the interior, but the challenge continues to keep the rest of Cumberland Island undeveloped. Residents fought off an attempt by Camden County to build a spaceport nearby in 2023. And then there's Sapelo Island. You might recall that during the Gilded Age, much of it was owned by Howard Coffin of the Hudson Motor Company, who encouraged his friends the Torreys to buy Ossabaw after the Greenwich fire. Coffin lost his proverbial shirt in the aftermath of the Great Depression, and in 1934 ended up selling the acreage of the former plantation antebellum estate he'd rebuilt on Sapelo to R.J. Reynolds, the scion of the tobacco family. Coffin had liquidated Sapelo to try and save his other real estate venture down the coast, the opulent cloister at Sea Island, where he took his own life in 1937. In spite of the rough economic times, cigarettes were one commodity that didn't suffer. Reynolds immediately began his own upgrades to the mansion on Sapelo, including stricter security measures after the 1932 kidnapping and murder of the Lindbergh baby, the child of the famous aviator Charles Lindbergh. Reynolds brought in Italian muralist Athos Menaboni to decorate the walls of the solarium with exotic birds and transform the third-floor ballroom into a circus scene of life-size zoo animals in cages surrounded by lion tamers and strongmen. In the 50s, Reynolds opened the property to paying guests to help offset the tax burden and also donated a portion to the University of Georgia for marine science research. Reynolds died in 1964, unshockingly, of emphysema. His heirs, in what by now is a familiar story, sold the estate and the majority of the island to the state of Georgia. Today's Sapelo Island is accessible only by boat and ostensibly protected from development, but we're going to talk about that later. The Reynolds Mansion still stands and is managed by the Georgia Department of Natural Resources as a tourist attraction and essentially a group campsite. It's usually booked out for years in advance with weddings and conferences. But on rare occasions, a date frees up, which is how I found myself cavorting around the high-ceiling living room in my pajamas one weekend. My research about the statues had led me to one of the last remaining Gilded Age estates in Georgia. And at first, it seemed like a hilarious irony that any old middle-class weirdo was allowed to drink champagne in the crumbling indoor bowling alley and sing karaoke in the circus room. After reading so much about the age of affluence, it was an irresistible temptation to experience some of the wilted remains of its lavish trappings, including basking in the shadows of several white plaster reproductions of water nymphs and other Roman-style statues. The giant iron lung machine in Mr. Reynolds' bathroom was kind of creepy, but I'm not going to lie, it was pretty cool to lounge in front of a fireplace as big as my garage. However, cosplaying a rich housewife of the 1900s lost its guild pretty quickly. We spent most of our time on Sapelo exploring the marshes and wide, empty beaches and touring historic sites other than the mansion. It can be argued that the most interesting and valuable thing about Sapelo Island isn't its big fancy house, it's the land and its people. Sapelo Island harbors one of the last historic Gullah Geechee communities in the country. The Gullah Geechee evolved along the southeastern coast before and after emancipation, practicing their West and Central African traditions and developing a distinctive language of their own. Their isolation from the rest of the South helped preserve this culture and allowed them to thrive as farmers and seafood harvesters well into the 20th century. They have been declared a sovereign nation within a nation, and the Gullah Geechee Heritage Corridor was established in 2006, incorporating communities in North and South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida.
Sapelo, the richness of Sapelo, I think sustained us to this day. I could not sit and talk to you about any of the folk ways of the people of the Gullah Geechee community without giving the accreditation to Sapelo, because that's where all our family members came.
I am so glad to finally introduce you to Sister Pat Gunn, a Savannah-based Gullah Geechee storyteller and the one who taught me how to properly set this table. Sister Pat is the proprietor of Underground Tours of Savannah and a renowned international storyteller who shares the city's overlooked history from the perspective of those who never got to share their own stories. She reminds that the first Gullah Geechee were enslaved and brought to America as skilled labor. They were the ones who already knew how to grow the rice, cotton, and indigo that the English colonists envisioned cultivating, but had very little idea how. In fact, enslavers actually went after and marketed specific African regions and tribes in the context of future commodities.
So I'm here, and I'm gonna grow rice, and I don't know how to grow rice. But I went and got the people from Sierra Leone, and they're the Mende tribe, which I'm a member of the Mende tribe. And so they're the best rice growers. So it's like the whole process of putting together a vision of how do we create a new world. We've got to get the right workforce, and we got to identify what our products are. So our products are going to be rice and cotton and tobacco and corn, wheat, and hay. And we're going to do sugar cane, but we're going to do that by going into the Caribbean basin and growing it there.
In the Low Country, which encompasses the Georgia and South Carolina coasts and marshlands, it was mostly about rice and cotton. Sister Pat explains that those forced to labor for cotton in the Carolinas referred to themselves as Gullah. The enslaved rice workers of Georgia called themselves Geechee.
There's rice and there's cotton. And so rice would be on the Geechee side. That's the Geechee tribe from Liberia. They were brought here intentionally to grow rice, along with the Mendes from Sierra Leone. On the Gullah side, which is Angola, I want people to get this, then that is the Carolina side.
So the difference between Gullah and Geechee refers both to geography and skill set. But their communities were intertwined along the coast, and all of their descendants together are part of the Gullah Geechee people.
So both states, as well as North Carolina and Florida, said we are going to be politically correct, and we're always going to say Gullah Geechee. Now, on the Georgia side, some of the elders, you will hear them say Geechee Gullah, because that's their thing. So we don't argue. As long as the two are put together, it's all good.
The plantation on Sapelo cultivated both cotton and rice, as well as sugar and livestock, and later indigo and silk. Its owner, Thomas Spalding, was born to a prominent Scottish family on St. Simon's in 1774 with deep ties to the mainland city of Darien. As a young man, Spalding served in the state and national legislatures, then dedicated himself to the science of agriculture. By 1830, he owned 400 enslaved people, to whom he applied the task system of labor, meaning once they completed their assigned work for the day, they had the relative autonomy to spend the rest of their time tending to their own crops and crafts. Spalding was fairly unique in that he did not employ white overseers and handed over operations of the entire plantation to an enslaved man named Bilali Muhammad, whom he had purchased particularly for his superior knowledge of how to grow rice. Bilali grew up in what is present-day Sierra Leone and was enslaved as a teenager to work on the sugar plantations of the Caribbean before Spalding brought him to Sapelo around 1803. Bilali was highly educated and could read and write. He was also a devout Muslim who left behind a 13-page treatise on the Quran handwritten in Arabic script. Bilali sired 7 daughters: Margaret, Bintu, Charlotte, Medina, Yoruba, Fatima, and Hester, who between them added significantly to the extended family and community that passed down knowledge and traditions for generations on Sapelo. After emancipation, many of their descendants bought land on the island where they already lived, though away from the former slave settlements. They continued to cultivate crops, farm oysters, weave intricate sweetgrass baskets, design original quilts, and share a language independent from the city of Savannah and the rest of the South, where the economy and the rest of society were in shambles during the Reconstruction era.
Sapelo is the place where they never left. They stayed there, so they were able to maintain all the culture. They preserved their folk ways at Sapelo, their food ways, their spirituality, their environmental rights, their water rights, and the most important, their burial rights.
There were 5 Geechee hamlets spread across the island, including Hog Hummock, Lumber Landing, and Raccoon Bluff, with several churches, schools, and the centrally located Behavior Cemetery, named that way since the enslavement days. It was a paradise protected from the outside world, according to Cornelia Walker Bailey, who wrote the memoir God, Dr. Buzzard, and the Bolito Man about growing up on Sapelo. In her book, Ms. Bailey traces her ancestry back to Bilali and recounts the history of Geechee-born John Grosvenor and William Hillary, who bought large tracts of land to parcel out to others for farming on Sapelo. Residents formed agricultural co-ops and found jobs at the federal hospital built across the bluff on Blackbeard Island. At the turn of the century, when Howard Coffin bought up most of the remaining parts of the island, some went to work for him, tending to his dairy cows and working in the big house, as it's referred to. When Reynolds took over, he offered only menial employment, and by the 1960s, many of the younger people had left Sapelo to pursue better education and opportunities. Reynolds had also begun aggressively acquiring land parcels from the Geechee, pushing people out of the bluff and other enclave into a single point. By the time the state stepped in, the population had dropped significantly, and today the community is consolidated at Hog Hummock near the south end of the island. At last count, the number of full-time Geechee residents numbered less than 30.
They are trying very hard to preserve the land. They have farms. They're still creating their food waste from that, the culture, everything that they can kind of like keepsake as a sacred piece, still going on Sapelo Island. It's still going on. The music, the quilting, all those things. There are people there that still know how to do that, to basket weaving, to fish netting. Not in large numbers.
While Sapelo has avoided the golf course takeovers of other Gullah Geechee hubs like St. Simon's and Hilton Head Island in South Carolina, its indigenous traditions are in no less danger of disappearing forever.
We are losing our elders, so we're losing that. And what we say is, when an elder dies, we lose an entire library.
Don't let me go. Don't let me drift away. Don't let me fall all alone.
That resonates even more terribly since October 19th, 2024, when part of the ferry dock at Sapelo collapsed, killing 7 people. All of them were in their 70s. This happened after a joyful day commemorating Sapelo's Geechee community. And though none of those who perished in the tragedy lived on the island, the loss of their memories and stories means a part of a legacy that cannot be replaced. Unfortunately, that's not the only pressing issue facing the last Geechee people of one of Georgia's last undeveloped islands. Climate change, land loss, and a zealous campaign to build large vacation homes in Hog Hummock loom on all fronts. We're going to hear more about the current challenges for Sapelo and how it relates back to the statues after the break. In the meantime, even if you can play pretend as a Gilded Age robber baron for the weekend, it doesn't mean you should. The Savannah Sideways podcast is brought to you by... Is it time for your annual eye exam? Dr. Erica Morrow and the staff at Foresight Unique Eyewear and Eye Care in historic downtown Savannah provide a high-level professional experience that is clearly above the rest. Dr. Morrow provides eye care personalized to your needs. Plus, you'll find the coolest, highest quality selection of frames in town. It's all about the optics. Schedule your appointment today at foresigheye.net. When people ask me about the best seafood in Savannah, there's no hesitation. I send them to Bubba Gumbo's on Tybee Island. This is a family-run, water-to-table situation where you can be sure that whatever you're served, perfectly grilled, blackened, or fried, was swimming in the sea this morning, and the guy who reeled it in is probably sitting at the bar. If you'd rather cook at home, BG Seafood Co-op next door can hook you up with the same fresh fruits de mer that they're preparing in the kitchen. And they'll even fillet it all for you and pack it on ice. And should you need a safe harbor to keep your boat, the Tybee Marina where it all goes down is happy to oblige you with a slip. Remember, my good people, friends don't let friends eat imported shrimp. Next time you're hankering for local seafood, head to Bubba Gumbo's and BG Seafood at the Tybee Marina on Lazaretto Creek. Around here, we already know that truth is stranger than fiction, and a lot more interesting, too. If you love cemeteries and you want to delve deep into Savannah's most famous one, you need to meet Don Touton, better known as Bonaventure Don. He offers true stories galore as you stroll through the gravestones. No ghosts, no nonsense, but you might see a wild fox. Whether you're a local or just making a pilgrimage to Savannah's iconic, hallowed grounds, Bonaventure Don will give you an experience to last a lifetime, and perhaps beyond. Book a tour now at bonaventuredon.com. Just to recap, 97% of Sapelo Island is owned by the state of Georgia. The property is managed by the Department of Natural Resources, including the Reynolds Mansion. It leases the old dairy farm to the University of Georgia Marine Institute and Estuarine Research Center, which hosts various groups that monitor pods of highly endangered North Atlantic right whales that migrate just offshore during the winter. During the summer, it patrols Sapelo's beaches to protect the hundreds of nests dug by loggerhead sea turtles, also endangered. Research is also being conducted on the sea level rise and salt marsh erosion that are increasing flooding on the island. The rest of the land is privately owned and concentrated in hog hummock, 434 acres. Geechee folks once owned it all, along with other inherited parcels across the island. In the 40s and 50s, Reynolds convinced, some will say intimidated, some families to sell or swap their properties to consolidate his own holdings. Many of these ancestral lots have been sold by absent heirs as younger generations left the island, lured away by modern life, but also driven off by what sure seems like a purposeful crusade. At the very least, instead of working to preserve this singular, exceptional community, the local government seems to be doing everything it can to squeeze them out. Keep in mind that this is McIntosh County, where in the 1970s, a tyrannical and unbelievably corrupt white sheriff went unchallenged for decades until a group of black citizens sued for their equal rights. The 1991 book, Praying for Sheetrock, helped expose the voter suppression, inferior public education, and outright violence and oppression these people faced. While many issues have been resolved in this part of South Georgia, certain pockets remain the same as it ever was. In February of 2020, just one county over in the town of Brunswick, 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery was shot and killed by two white men while jogging near his home. The DA overseeing the prosecution of the murderers was indicted for violating her oath of office and obstructing the police investigation. She was later cleared of all charges. In 2022, McIntosh County acknowledged it had been under-providing basic services on Sapelo like trash pickup and road maintenance. It had to pay out $2 million to the Sapelo Geechee community, which pays property taxes to cover these services. A tax freeze was also part of the settlement. But in 2023, the county commission introduced new zoning ordinances that would jack up property taxes and allow new owners, who are almost exclusively white, to build vacation homes more than twice the size of most of the modest homes in Hog Hummock. The Gullah Geechee filed a request with the help of storied civil rights firm the Southern Poverty Law Center for a referendum that would require a public vote to approve the new zoning. The county countered that with a demand for dismissal of the request. The outcome is currently awaiting judgment from the state Supreme Court. There's also the matter of the island's historic community center that recently changed tenants. The county awarded the lease to a white resident who reopened it as a restaurant and bar. I returned to Sapelo, sans silk PJs, to talk about it with Maurice Bailey, the son of author Cornelia Walker Bailey, and the founder of Solo, Save Our Legacy Ourself. His organization is an offshoot of the one his mother helped establish, the Sapelo Island Cultural and Revitalization Society, known as SICARS. I put my hand across my heart as I crossed the newly repaired gangway, thinking of the elders that had perished there just a few months before. An eerie echo of the tragedy at Ebenezer Creek 170 years ago. The families of the Sapelo Seven, as they're now known, have filed a suit against the state for the catastrophic failure of the dock. And in spite of all the tribulations, I found Maurice at the top of the landing in good spirits.
How you doing? Very nice to meet you, sir. Jessica Leigh Lebos.
Yo, player.
Good to see you. You finished that. I don't need to. I'm not in a hurry. I got all day.
We jumped in his ancient two-seater pickup and began winding our way around the island. Born on Sapelo in the late 1960s, Maurice left for Atlanta once he was grown for a good salary and to raise a family. He returned in 2018 shortly after his mother passed away to continue her legacy by reviving farm practices and educating visitors. He owns a small bar and gift shop in Hog Hummock painted with an iconic mural that reads, "The Spirit of Sapelo."
So the agriculture program, we do syrup with our sugar cane. We do indigo demonstrations. We do the red peas, and eventually we'll get into a lot more herbal stuff and vegetables and various things. So I always travel all over the place advocating for Sapelo. So it's just part of our voice. And so I didn't want those stories to disappear. So when people get some red peas, family can link those stories to the red peas sitting around this table when somebody did this or did that. The same thing with syrup that we used to sit there and grind the syrup and make the biscuits and the cornbread. And so this is all part of keeping the heritage alive.
He says it's been tough to grow anything on a profitable scale since regular labor is hard to come by. Increased flooding and saltwater intrusion have made it even more difficult to bring crops to fruition. Any form of regular income on the island is a rarity these days. While some descendants have worked at DNR or the university, most of those jobs are menial and don't foster entrepreneurial independence. They certainly aren't going to entice more descendants back to the island. Maurice says building up tourism to create jobs had been in the works until recently.
Community center was all part of our plans for stability in the community and bringing people back to the community. Building lodging in the community is another thing for the tourists that come to the island. Having a restaurant, having a gift shop, having a medical center, having these things and bring people back to Sapelo, provide jobs for people that don't want to leave Sapelo.
According to news reports, the county-owned building that housed the community center served as a meeting place, voting precinct, and medical clinic for Sapelo residents since the 1980s. Around the same time it introduced the new zoning laws, the county procured federal funding to improve the building, then put it out for bid. In spite of numerous proposals submitted by the Geechee community for a restaurant with mixed-use space, the county awarded it to a white resident who was able to obtain a liquor license without the required special permit. Coastal Community Health, who had been slated to provide part-time medical care in the community center, soon pulled its contract. During this same time period, a bill was surreptitiously passed by the Georgia State Assembly that changed the jurisdiction of the Sapelo Island Heritage Authority, a government entity put in place in the 1980s to protect the unique heritage of the island. Without consulting the Geechee community before it came to the Capitol floor, House Bill 273 shuffled around who sits on the authority, opening up an empty seat that could ensure that non-descendants dominate the board. The bill also used the term resident rather descendant, granting new owners the same rights and access to protection as the people whose families have lived and labored there for centuries.
Take my breath away.
The bill was amended to specify residents who are descendants and to make sure that empty seat was held by an elected official. But then those amendments disappeared when the bill moved on to the House. The bill did not pass that year's legislative session, but the passive-aggressive, or really aggressive campaign to run the Geechee off Sapelo continues. Maurice drove us on dirt roads to Behavior Cemetery, an intractable reminder of his people's claim on this land, as well as its precipitous future.
Original 44 families of enslaved people of Thomas Spalding is buried out here. So our families all over the country, when they pass away, they want to come back home. They want to come back to Sapelo where their ancestor spirits are. So we bring them back to Sapelo on that ferry, and we bury them out here at Behavior. Yeah, life of Sapelo. And we just had a burial out here yesterday.
Oh, yeah?
Another descendant passed away.
Another library gone.
Don't let me go.
And now Maurice says not even Sapelo's sacred burial grounds are beyond the reach of gentrification.
The spirits are important to us. The cemetery is important to us because of all the things that people went through that's in the cemetery. But now we have white landlord for the last several years requesting the state and the county and the community by giving money to the churches because he won't be buried in Behavior Cemetery. And the only reason he will be buried in Behavior Cemetery because he won't be the first white person buried in an African-American cemetery on Sapelo.
That's gross.
So we fighting that issue right now also.
Wow, that is appalling. So what is going to save the people of Sapelo? Their land is already supposed to be protected, but the Sapelo Island Heritage Authority has historically been underfunded, and as we see, influenced by those who do not believe preserving its Geechee presence is a priority. The land still owned by descendants is under immediate threat from rising taxes and prospective buyers. Even part of the 97% owned by the state could one day be leased to some politician's golf course development project. It's going to take money, obviously, and also constant vigilance, political support, and legal expertise.
And it's going to take a younger generation to do that. So, us in the 60s and 70s, we either don't have that knowledge or don't have that ability to do that. So we have to rely on our next generation, on the current generations to keep things going. But in the meantime, we got to empower them. We got to do what we need to do to keep them empowered, for they be able to do what they need to do to save our culture.
So you're saying we need more lawyers?
We need more lawyers. We need more lawyers. We need more activists. We need more people that's not going to be afraid to take a risk.
I left Maurice's store that day with several bottles of purple-hued sugar cane syrup in my bag and a stack of stickers that say, "Keep Sapelo Geechee." On the way back to the ferry, he drove me past the big house, its aging facade looking a little less grand in the daylight. The only bridge to Sapelo remains figurative, and it will stay that way for the time being. But I had come to find a connection between the statues and the island. I thought it was in the mansion and having a laugh at being able to dance on the faded coattails of late-stage capitalism. It turns out the link isn't in gilded walls and Art Deco ashtrays. It's in the resilience of a people whose ancestors were abducted and brought here to toil under the sun and amongst the mosquitoes to make already rich men even richer, who, in spite of all odds and ceaseless attempts at erasure, have maintained their sovereignty for almost 300 years. The story of the statues, which is a story of the wealth that built America and what has defined Western civilization, includes them. Full stop. But without watchfulness and advocacy, the Geechee of Sapelo Island are as endangered as the loggerhead sea turtles that nest on its shores, more so actually. Their extinction, whether by attrition or aggression, would be a loss for us all. So how do we help? I remembered some wisdom that Sister Pat shared.
I think you make people care through truth telling, and you take truth telling and you add in a cup of living history.
So here's a reminder that we are living the history that our descendants will learn. Whose version of it are we going to pass on? Something to think about. We are coming to the end of this tale, but not before we get to share air with the surplus statues that started it all. See you in the penultimate episode of the strange story of Savannah's ancient Roman statuary.
We built this fire, we danced around in our disguise. And we smoked the apple, we rubbed the stardust in our eyes. And we crossed the river where the elders lost their lives in the Sapelo sky. Constellation of our own in the Sapelo sky. Constellation of their own in the Sapelo sky. Constellation of their own. Hold me, don't let me go. Hold me, don't let me go. Hold me, don't let me go. Hold me, supernova, don't let me go.
The Savannah Sideways podcast is brought to you by The 5 Spot. Ancient artifacts may be fragile, but The 5 Spot's new menu is rock solid. Classics like the signature meatloaf and chicken fried chicken are still part of the permanent collection, while new masterpieces like Todd's famous chili and loaded mac and cheese with Mojo pulled pork and collard greens have joined the rotating exhibit. These curators of comfort food present a lineup of juicy burgers and giant salads for lunch and dinner 7 days a week, plus their famous brunch every Saturday and Sunday that's overflowing with bloodies and mimosas. With locations in Sandfly, Habersham Village, and Richmond Hill, the 5 Spot has something delicious for everyone at your table. And by Ships of the Sea Maritime Museum. Housed in the historic Scarborough House, the Ships of the Sea Maritime Museum pays homage to America's great maritime past while expanding its lens towards some of the city's most exciting artistic voices. Wander through luxurious galleries of ship models and modern installations, amble amongst exquisite gardens, or attend, or host, an event at the finest open-air venue in town. Book it all at shipsofthesea.org. Special thanks to our friends under the Lincoln Oaks. If you're too dumb for Starland and too ugly for downtown, there is a seat at the table and a spot at the bar for you at 6B, Lone Wolf Lounge, Over Yonder, and Mood Rights. This little slice of shade in Midtown is where the most fun goes down. And by Shot by Somi, award-winning portrait and brand photography for every occasion. A photo isn't just an image, it's a story whispered through light and time. Book your session at shotbysomi.com. The Savannah Sideways podcast is produced by D. Daniels Media, female-owned full podcast production services for businesses, nonprofits, and special projects. Storytelling with a purpose. Go to ddanielsmedia.com.